restorative justice work out in Denver, which I'm talking about next. But for now, I'm going to talk about my work in Uganda. So, I took notes on my iPhone. So I'm not actually texting, I'm actually looking at what I was going to say. So essentially, Uganda was colonized by the British in the 1880s. The really interesting thing to really kind of think about it, Uganda was colonized by the British like after Colorado had become a state, after Wyoming had become a state. It was very late in the game in terms of colonialism. In fact, in some ways, in terms of colonialism, Uganda was one of the last countries in the world to sort of come under European control. Obviously, there's 3 African countries that never came under colonialism. You guys know what they are? Ethiopia, Liberia, and Lesotho. To whatever extent you can argue Lesotho wasn't under colonial control. But Uganda was one of the very last ones. And so the British by then had really sort of had a well-tuned machine in terms of their colonial project. Unlike South Africa, where they used white settlers to kind of like, be the upper class, in Uganda they chose the Baganda. So the Baganda were like the most powerful tribe or ethnic group, whatever you want to call them, in Uganda at the time. And so they used them to sort of be what the white people were in South Africa. And there's a guy named Mahmoud Mamdani in Colombia. He's kind of like the foremost scholar on ethnicity in Uganda. Ethnicity in East Africa, in Uganda and South Africa. And he argues that apartheid really is the British model. Everywhere the British went, they used apartheid. It's just in South Africa happened to be so much more explicit because it was white-black, with the Indians also playing their role. Whereas in Uganda, they actually at that point were like, we don't really need to settle white people here to control. We can just use one of the local ethnic groups, put them in power, and then we'll run it through them. And so the Baganda actually became the clerks. The Baganda became the civil servants. The Baganda were the ones that were given education. And the Baganda and of course the country was named Uganda after the Baganda are one of 56 ethnic groups in Uganda, but they were kind of given the control of the country. The country was named after them. They sort of took over. The Choli in the north were chosen to be the soldiers. They were trained in military, and they were trained to sort of be the military arm. You can probably see where this is going, right? Seems like a great plan, as long as the British are sort of just focused on resource extraction. Subjugating local groups to get what they want out of the country. So this goes on for about 100, not quite 100 years, from 1880s up through the 1940s, 1950s. Uganda gets its independence in 1963. The ethnic group I was living with were called the Banyoro. The Banyoro were completely sort of marginalized by the British. They didn't get along with the British. They were actually the last ethnic group in Uganda to be subjugated. We're talking like 1910 before they were completely subjugated by the British. And they're really only subjugated through a complete sort of like total shock and awe campaign. They killed other cattle. They introduced disease, sort of classic stuff that we did with Native Americans here. Just destroyed them. Their population went from like 2 million down to like 300,000. Which is really decimated. So the Banyoro were kind of a non-player in sort of the post-colonial Uganda because they were so decimated. So in 1963, Uganda gets its independence. They leave, and of course, typical, like most colonizing powers, when they left, they're like, we've given the Baganda all the power all this time. Probably shouldn't have done that. So as we leave, good luck, see you later. And a guy named Milton Obote, who was from the north, he was an Acholi, who had come up through the army ranks, took over. He, of course, then goes on a killing spree towards the Bagandas, to sort of get revenge for all these years that the Baganda have been subjugating the northerners, the Acholi, and then the other groups. So Obote is in power. He does that for about 10 years, and there's still a lot of tension with the Baganda. Another young man comes up through the army ranks named Idi Amin. Similar kind of thing. His ethnic group was from the north. They were, in the military. He comes up through the military and has a coup against Obote, takes over in 72. Runs the country into the ground. You guys have seen the film, Last King of Scotland? There's a lot of things that have been written and said about Idi Amin. He's sort of the classic corrupt, bad power person. And of course there's some truth to that, and there's some falsehood to that and all that. But Idi Amin runs the country into the ground for like 10 years. 79, he goes out of power. A guy named Yoweri Museveni is in the bush. He's a Marxist rebel. He overthrows it. But as he's getting ready to take power, Obote comes back, takes over power, rules another 5 years, civil war. Finally, Museveni comes to power in 1986. Starts, basically rebuilding the country. He's a Marxist revolutionary. But, there's these strong ethnic ties. So he's sort of running things to the benefit of his own ethnic group. And long story short, he's in power up to this day. He was supposed to be term limited out, changed the constitution, he's still there. The reason he's probably still there is because there's strong ethnic ties. There's a book called The Challenge of the Nation State in Africa, Black Man's Burden. Anyone read that one in your studies? Called Black Man's Burden, The Challenge of the Nation State in Africa. And what this argues is that these neo-patrimonial lines are more powerful than sort of statecraft. And so when a guy's in power, he has more of a moral obligation to help people who've helped him come to power than he does to help the entire country. And so Museveni has sort of run the country that way, and now it's to the point where if he leaves power, he has a lot of enemies out there. So he's sort of clinging to power. And in the late 90s, another war started, where the Northerners, kind of Obote's descendants, the guy who'd been in power back in '63, they kind of went to war with the North. And this war has been simmering, and this is what you hear about a lot these days. It's called the Lord's Resistance Army. You guys familiar with this? There's a film that came out that was really popular in college campuses for a while called Silent Children? Invisible Children, yeah. And so it was like some college dudes, had some typical sort of MTV pranks, but did bring attention to the plight of northern Uganda. And so this war has been simmering kind of off and on, hot again, for quite a while. So basically that's kind of Uganda's story up till now. It's much more complex than that, but that gives you a basic picture. So for me, I was like you guys, I was an undergrad. I was a philosophy major, and I also did a program called, in my undergrad, small liberal arts college, was called Hunger, Human Needs and Global Resources. And it was a double major you could slap on any other major you happen to have, and you would do an internship in a country kind of around your discipline. So I was a philosophy major, went to Guatemala, lived in a Mayan village, worked on a coffee plantation, kind of did that whole scene. And great, it was great. And I came out and I thought, I want to make a difference. I want to make the world better. So I guess my first question for you guys is sort of, you're thinking about international relations, you're thinking about this sort of thing. What right do we have, or what's sort of our motivation for wanting to make the world better in lands that are not our own? What's the moral justification for that? Because I came out of my undergrad really like, I want to make the world more peaceful and more just. And I'm going to do it in Guatemala. So why are we like that? What goes into our thinking? Why do we study international relations and want to do that?
I guess to promote international peace and stability around the world.
Okay, so there's sort of that, like, stability is it benefits everyone. Right? So you can kind of make the argument that it's in all of our best interests to promote stability. So there's some selfishness.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Why do we want to promote international peace? Why do we give a shit, really, about these other countries? And should we? And do we have the right to?
I mean, that's, I guess, arguable, but I think for like a lot of people, there's a lot of oppression and injustice due to this kind of barter system that we benefit from. Maybe it's to like assuage our guilt and our country's guilt in general. You kind of want to like help out because I think you do kind of like lose focus of like what's immediately around you in LA, for example, but like this outward focus.
So our own sort of complicity in the current state of affairs motivates us to want to be involved and help out. Others?
I mean, it could be, to a certain extent, purely altruistic, I think, but I mean, altruism also benefits us because it makes us feel good about ourselves.
Right.
So I think...
Releases a chemical, I heard this the other day on NPR. Makes you feel really nice for like 45 minutes.
But yeah, I mean, for me personally, like, I feel like devoting a career to international relations would be devoting, a large part of my life to something that I think is worthwhile. And I think also that sort of transcendence and connecting our lives to something that's much greater than just our own individual affairs is, I think it's a key component of happiness.
Okay.
I don't know.
Yeah, so I was thinking these sorts of things that you guys are talking about. I came from a faith tradition that had a big emphasis on peace and justice, and that sort of our job on this planet was to make the world more peaceful and just, to whatever extent we could. So that was like the transcendent piece you talked about. That was a big piece of it for me.